organization. It's a movement. We're talking about unity. We're talking about unity. So we're aimed to taking down the system of race by educating, enlightening, informing, and positively debating with those who have counterviews.
Welcome to Talk About Unity, and I'm really excited today, all right, because I've got my friends here, the house crew, and it's going to be a really exciting show, and I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on Carlen's commentary like I usually do at the beginning of the show, but I'm going to use that time to talk about what the house is. Then I'm going to introduce you all to some great people in my life, and so without any further ado, I'm going to kind of talk to you about what we're here and what we're going to do today with the house. Before there was George Floyd, there were people in America involved in lines of work that were addressing what some call systemic issues that have plagued our country for years, decades, and even centuries. While they may not have been labeled a social justice movement, they surely worked to provide solutions in that area. And while they might not have been people who cast things as anti-racist, they provided answers to problems that obviate the need for anti-racism solutions, which you hear so much about today. These are the people that I bring here today to talk about the house. Shortly, you will hear each of them talk about their contributions to America in their individual realms of experience and expertise. And I just want to start by saying they are the heroes that America needs today. I call our team the house, the crew, we're the modern day Avengers, because we are a team of superheroes coming about to change the world. We're going to save the world. And that's what we're going to do with the house. So without any further ado, I want to begin, and I'm going to go alphabetically, and I'm going to introduce the members of the house. Of course, I've got one in studio here with me, and you see her on the camera, but I've got three, I think maybe two in right now. We'll get that third one in, but I want to start alphabetically. So we begin with the world famous Joshua Bach. And Josh, I want you to take some time, tell people where you are, where you're from, what you do, and what you do with the house. And we'll get into all the other stuff later, but just give a preliminary introduction, and then we'll start talking about our house crew. So Joshua Bach.
Yes, delighted to be here. So excited. My name is Josh Bach in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm a co-founder with Amplify. We have a podcast network where we bring unity on a local level right here in Indianapolis, and we're expanding into other cities. But our focus really more than anything else is to find some great people within the community that are doing wonderful things that are bringing community building aspects to what they do, whether it's in the nonprofit sector or what they do with their business, and so on and so forth. But married, just celebrated 20 years, have 5 beautiful daughters, all came to us by the way of adoption, and couldn't be happier. They're getting older and older. My oldest is 15, soon to be 16, and then I go to 12, and then 10, 10, and 10. So busy household, but wouldn't have it any other way.
Hey, you heard that key word, busy household. He knows a lot about the house. All right. So with those number of people in the house, you've got to build something very good there. So very good. Excited to have you here, Josh. And next we'll go with Mr. George Middleton. George, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do with the house.
Good morning. Yes, my name is George Middleton. I'm a mental health therapist and an author promoting a series of works addressing the connection between race ideology and its impact on our mental health. And my work has brought me into contact with these illustrious people, such as Josh and yourself and the other guests that are going to be introducing themselves. And I'm excited to be a part of constructing this new collaborative arrangement called the house.
Outstanding. And you'll notice, and I'll talk about this later, but I call everybody, we're the C group because everyone's a chief officer with a C word. And I'm going to cover those as soon as we finish. But I wanted to cut in because George is chief cognition officer He's a mental health professional. And when I say cerebral, another C word, he is cerebral. So we'll get to that later. All right, next we're going to introduce Miss Martha Rogers. She's here in studio with me. I'm glad to have you. She's my partner in crime here today. And so, Martha, tell us who you are. And her C is civility. Oh,
Civility.
hit it, Martha.
Thank you, Carlen. It's always fun to be here with you. I grew up in a house. I
Great.
have always loved being a homemaker and a mother of 3 children and wife to Gary Rogers. And Gary and I spent 12 years in Amarillo building homes, custom homes for people, which was a delightful process to create somebody's dream home.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have created a company, Champions of Civility. Now I am building up champions to live life together, connecting through civility. So I focus on writing children's books and writing materials for teachers and parents to help their children to develop a civility mindset and to value other people and how to get along with each other and how to build a great life.
Outstanding. And I can tell you that that house experience she has building homes has been invaluable to us as the house crew. And so we'll talk more about that later. Okay, and so we've got one more, Dr. Clyde Rivers, who is not in yet, and I think he's trying to come in. Do we have him in yet, Vince? He's not in. And so we'll get to him when he comes in, because he's trying, I know right now, to come back in. So before we introduce Dr. Rivers, let's get some background on the house and what we're talking about. How does the house work? What's it about? What's its keys to success? What is success? All right, so let's talk about what we've done and how we came together. Initially, we had our separate areas of endeavor. And on Talk About Unity, then I come from the race background. And I guess I need to introduce myself as well. You see me here every week. But one of the things that is big push for me is identifying that race has been a construct that we need not use. And so I began from that platform. So I began meeting some of these people that you've just that you've just been welcome to. George Middleton was the first one who contacted me, and from then on we knew that we had this idea that we needed to promulgate to the world. And so George and I have been working in several different areas since then trying to do that. Subsequent to that, I met Miss Martha Rogers, and then she introduced me to Dr. Clyde Rivers. And when I went to Indianapolis, then I met Joshua Bach, and that's the team. And this team, we've been meeting every week for, how long has it been, guys? You'll remember, it's like over more than a year.
End of March.
End of March, it'll be a year. All right, so basically we started with COVID. Mm-hmm. So we started with COVID and we started meeting. And this is something I think that's going to be very beneficial for people to understand, that it's through that process of meeting, because we've met every week pretty much. We might have missed a few, but we've met almost every week. Then we've had the discussions necessary to enter into a level of dialogue that allows us to collaborate and construct effective communication. That is the product that we're going to offer to the world. And so when we start talking about the house and some of the things that we're going to talk about today, you understand that's the foundation that we've laid. No pun intended. We're talking about the house, but that's the foundation that we've laid that we think is important for everyone across the board to lay in their organization. So before we get into any other questions and before we introduce Dr. Clyde, if any of my other house, hey, let's do this like we do every week. Let's have a free-flowing discussion of viewpoints, because normally it's not me just pontificating. It's usually George pushing back, Josh saying, this is what I think, Dr. Clyde providing, and we do that. So I want to make it one of those days. Don't act like we're on a TV or radio show and everybody's like, well, is it my turn? Let's do it like we normally do it, okay? All right, so let's begin by talking about your part of the house. Get specific about what do you think is your key feature that you bring to the house, and we can start, kind of a free-flowing discussion, but anyone who knows what they want to say about some of the opening comments or something about the house, you can go ahead and begin dialoguing about that, and we'll get more structured as we go through. All right, comments? and there's silence.
I'll jump in because
Okay.
I'm the communicator, right?
There you go. Chief Communication Officer Joshua Bach.
Really just I think bringing to the table, it's interesting to see all the different attributes that the team, the house brings, and each and every one of us were gifted in different ways in order to work together on this project. And so I believe more and more that my skills are tied in with communication, with relationships, with collaboration, figuring out ways to pull and bring ideas and people together. A lot of what we do with Amplify is community building. So we're working on a regular basis of people with all different walks of life, different political backgrounds, but because we're working on specific projects, we never have the issues. We don't have the issues because we're focused in on the mission, and we're bringing our talents and tools together as a group. And I think that's what I'm being called to do here.
And I can agree with that. Josh is a networker. I mean, even since the time I've met him, Josh has introduced me to tremendous and an amazing number of people. When you think about the sheer number of people you've introduced me to, which has been amazing because they all created a connection that was very valuable to me in what I'm doing specifically, but then in what we're doing together as the house. And so that's one of his strengths. And I think in every organization, and that's one of the things that we want to push out to the house when we talk about it, in every organization, you have people with these particular skills that without that person in the mix, it's lacking in the organization. And so that's very key into the house concept, that we understand and value each person's gifts and abilities. And so you'll see that as we talk today, that everybody's kind of so different. And the difference between what we offer in the house and what most people get in their organizations is that we find the value in that difference, whereas most organizations see that as something that is a negative, and they try to get everyone to be the same or alike or have the same viewpoints. There's so much value in that. And you think about our society and where we are today, if we can harness that and show people the value in that difference and make their organizations, their institutions, their families, their homes better, we've got something very valuable there. So very good. Okay, Martha, you want to talk about any of that before we get going?
Sure. My focus is on helping other people to connect through civility, through teaching, training, through dialogue, to help other people to see why we want to connect through civility, how we do that, how we can learn some civility mindset skills and tools to do that more effectively, and how important it is. No organization can be successful without some effective communication, and communication doesn't work when we don't value each other, we don't listen to each other, we don't do what you just said. Realize that every person has a gift to offer. And it is so important to have a perception of other people that everyone has goodness and greatness inside of them. And when we focus on that in other people, we help to connect. And sometimes we help other people to appreciate their own greatness. And some people are struggling with that. And when we do the opposite, when we judge and criticize people, then we create division. And a lot of the issues in organizations and businesses are very simply, be solved very simply by focusing on a civility mindset, valuing each individual, how to bring the best part of each person that's in the organization out so that we can work together for the common good.
That's really good. How has that in the people that you've met, because I think you knew Dr. Clyde before you knew me, how has that worked in your relationship building with the people that you're working with now in the house?
In the house?
Yeah, civility.
Well, my focus on civility began when I heard Dr. Rivers speak. And he said, every person ever born has a gift. And when one person dies without sharing their gift, we all suffer. And that started me on a path to very seriously thinking about the value of each person. And so in the house group, each one has, I think we start with the shared purpose of wanting to help other people, wanting to make our world better. And so when we have a difference of opinion, it's not something that divides us. We just talk about it. And okay, what are we going to do with this? And we take the next step and we stay connected because we do value each other.
That's outstanding. That's really good. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get deep. We're going to continue to try to connect with Dr. Clyde so he can come in. But before we go to break, George, I want you to offer up a bit of what you've experienced since you joined the house crew. That is our Chief Cognition Officer, George Middleton. Here he is.
Well, the experience has been mental utopia. I consider the house a metaphor for belief systems. And basically, when it comes down to it, everything that you see, everything that you hear is a result of or a filter through one's belief system. So in constructing this project that we're doing to break down divisions, my role is to challenge our beliefs, to not to criticize, not to diminish or discourage, but to make people aware of how we're thinking. And that the goal in that is to help provide intentionality and clarity to whatever our goal is, whatever organization you're with, whatever loved ones that you're trying to be benefit to. A lot of times we don't realize it, but there is a big gap between what we say consciously that we want to do and what we subconsciously believe. So the goal is with the house is to align our subconscious with our conscious so that our true values can actually be effectively liberated rather than we betray ourselves because we're not clear on what we really believe.
Outstanding. Thank you. And I call him Dr. Middleton, but of course, he's George Middleton, cognitive behavioral therapist, and he is our Chief Cognition Officer. So thanks for that. Now, after we come back from a break, we're going to have Dr. Clyde Rivers in because I know it's going to happen. He's going to come in, and then we're going to get much deeper into this house on this edition of Talk About Unity. We'll see you after the break. Hello, I'm Carlen Charleston, Executive Director of Erase Races, and I want to take this time to invite you to an opportunity to change the world. Perhaps you're too busy and too preoccupied to help change the world, but please take the next 2 minutes to listen to how we plan to do it. The divisiveness and bitterness observed in our country today is not a coincidence of the current administration or any administration before. It is also not a product of a singular or multiple infractions by a zealous or racist police force. No, the race problem precedes the founding of our country. Our very history speaks in racial language, and most everything that happens in our society now carries with it racial baggage. It simply does not have to stay that way. The Erase Race campaign has only one objective: the unifying of all Americans, and that without regard to the color of their skin. This is a difficult challenge because of our history, but we can do it if we believe. If we believe that Martin Luther King Jr. was right when he said, "We are tied together in a single garment of destiny," we can do it. We can do it if we believe the founding principles upon which our country was built, that all men are created equal, we can do it. And if we believe that God did in fact make all nations of men from one man, and that we are all therefore part of one family, one race, then we can do it. Yes, the task is monumental, but the reward is worth the challenge. If you would like to join us as we change America and inevitably change the world, go to eraseraces.com, sign up today, and welcome to Erase Races, because there is only one race and you're in it. Welcome back to Talk About Unity, the House Edition. I'm so excited today because I've got the entire house crew here, and you saw the introduction of 4 of the members of the house team, but there are 5 of us, and our big fearless leader is here, Dr. Clyde Rivers. And Dr. Clyde Rivers, everybody else gave their introduction. We're so glad to have you here from I Change Nations. Dr. Clyde Rivers, go ahead and give us an intro. Tell us who you are and what you do with the house. I call you our Chief Collaboration Officer because you're a man who goes around the world and meets everybody and does great things with them. So Dr. Clyde Rivers, welcome.
Hey guys, honored to be here. Is that Martha who makes all things new, Rogers? Good to see you, Martha. Hey, what I am, I'm the voice of world civility, and it's a concept called kindness and respect. See, I believe the issue of the world, and of course I come at it from a biblical worldview, what other people don't have to have that same view, and I understand that we can still get along and we can still dialogue as we have different views. My thing is this: the royal law in the Bible says, if you love your neighbor as yourself, you live under liberty. If you mistreat your neighbor, you live under transgression. So that's a view that I hold dear to. So I believe that everyone can have a different faith, a different belief, and it doesn't mean that we can't get along and move our societies forward. So I'm the world's leading voice in that narrative of world civility. Honored to be with you all.
Outstanding. We thank you, Dr. Clyde Rivers. And without any further ado, I want to get to something that we can have one of our regular house sessions. You know how we do it, Dr. Rivers and George and Josh. We go. All right. So I'm going to throw this out, a real-time world event. And I want to ask you all, theoretically, what would the House offer to Congress dealing with the issue of impeachment? Now, we talk about the fact that we provide tools for people. We say we're simply the architects helping you design this house that you need to build. What kind of tools would we offer to Congress on an issue of impeachment? If they called up the House, Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell might call me tomorrow and say, we need the House. What do you think we would have to offer to these people concerning the house that they need to build? And it's just free. Anybody can talk.
Yeah. First of all, I would say the vision of what you're trying to accomplish is bigger than the next 4 to 5 years. The vision that you're trying to accomplish is for the stability of a nation. And what I would recommend they do, I would set up narratives for actually dialogue. But the one thing that I would say we have to do more than anything is wait for the final outcome and then put the pieces together. Once it's in litigation, let it go through its process, but the house would have to be built after. So it's hard to build during an institutional dialogue, but it has to be healthy dialogue where in this dialogue there's going to be opposing views because the right and the left think different. I just wrote a book called Differences. The most normal thing in the world for people to be and think is different. So I would engage their hearts for an actual different kind of dialogue. And then when the outcome comes, now we help you build a house to move the world forward, to move America forward.
And that's one of the things we talked about earlier before you in, Dr. Rivers. We talked about how in the House, and maybe we got that from Dr. Rivers, but we talked about how organizations need to see differences as valuable and not as reasons to, disagree or go opposite directions. And I think that's a very good one for where our Congress needs to go. And they've got a great opportunity to do that. We'll see if they seize upon that. Okay, George, Martha, Josh, any else on that? We're talking about what would we do? Impeachment's happening in our Congress. How could the House contribute?
You all have probably heard this before. To get the right answers, you have to ask the right questions. And there's nothing more effective than a really well-constructed question designed to get to the goal of whatever organizational mission you're working.
That's the chief cognition officer. That's what he would say. Okay, go ahead, George.
Mitch, and so for Mitch and company, and again, I take judgment and criticism out of the conversation. There's no right or wrong. It's just being honest with yourself. And so, if you're leadership, you can't help those you're serving if you don't know what your own blemishes are. And so the best service that we can provide them is that ability for them to be self-reflective and be honest with themselves, with no repercussions, no negative blaming, finger pointing, but just being honest. Hey guys, why are you really here? Is it politics only, or is it really service to your country? And then whatever you say, let's rationally take that through a process of what I call disputation. Are your answers matching your outcomes? And if they're not, what accounts for that distance? And you have to have those type of objective, rational type of evaluative discussions if you're going to really be in alignment with the goals that you say you are as a position in leadership. So asking the right questions and allowing for honesty without any blaming, without any finger pointing, there's no reason to get angry, upset. What you believe is what you believe. It's fine. Just be honest about it. And let's see if that really matches what the goal of your organization is.
Very, very good. So we had the value in differences from Dr. Clyde Rivers. We had the great dialogue through questioning from George Middleton. What would civility say in this situation, Martha?
Well, I like to keep it simple. That's why I wrote a book, and it's for anyone who wants to hear. And the book is Living in the World of Shapes, Connecting Through Civility. So in the world of shapes, there is the country of triangle, the country of square, the country of circle, the country of rectangle. Mm-hmm. Each country has a different shape and a different color. And inside of that country lives a different letter. And just as each letter of the alphabet is very important and necessary for communication, every person is important in value. So you have to start with valuing each person, giving up the desire to force your way on somebody else, and come together and dialogue in a way that we're willing to listen to each other. And this will solve a lot of problems.
So how would Congress do that? I mean, that sounds like a lot of good theory. So whose responsibility is it to initiate that at this point? We're talking about the impeachment. You got the Senate, you got the House, Nancy Pelosi over in the House, you got Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell in the Senate, and you've got also the bully pulpit of the president. Whose job is it to initiate this thing that we call civility, this value that Dr. Rivers talked about, these questions that George was talking about? Whose responsibility do we think it is to initiate that? Where does that start?
It starts with any one of the leaders.
Okay.
Any one of the leaders can choose to have that mindset and to begin to encourage others to have that mindset to value each person and be willing to listen to the other people. And so
you're saying this thing could happen when we talk about the impeachment, we're talking about Congress. Any of those people could stand up and be the person who makes the difference in that situation. George, Dr. Clyde, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I think one of the big things I think is when you're looking at right and wrong. See, what happens when you have an adversarial system is adversarial. So our system is an adversarial system. So what happens is at times in that system, logic doesn't matter. It's, do we have enough votes? Do we have enough people to get to keep our power grid? So at times the information is that is being addressed is more, do we lose the power? And see, what I think we have to look at is this. I think everyone in there has to look at what's the way forward for our nation. What's the way forward? And it's going to be hard dialogue, because I wrote a book called When Histories Collide. Now, I'll be brief in this discussion, but histories collide is this. Everyone's experience is their reality. So if I'm talking to a person that didn't experience life the way I experienced it, his reality is going to be different than mine. So what happens, you have people fighting for their reality. So, but if my reality isn't your reality, then I'm telling the truth, and so are you. So if we're both telling the truth about our histories, we have to then learn how to listen to each other for change. So what I see happen for decade after decade is histories are colliding, experiences are colliding, and that's the problem now. Because when you tell me all these people just do that, or all these people are this, no, that's your experience. So now we have histories that are colliding, and we have to now listen to each other for a change, while understanding no one's history may be wrong, but what's the way forward?
Outstanding. And so that takes a responsibility from each of us then to begin hearing, but how do we, because, you know, when I hear someone else's story, then I'm going to say, well, that's not my experience. What's going to make me accept their story as factual, real, and something that I need to, give empathy to? What's going to make me do that? Because I can hear your story and say, well, that's your experience. Because I get a lot of people who tell me this, because I had what I call a unique experience growing up, the way that I grew up. And people say, yeah, but that's your experience. It's not everybody else's. And it's true. That's mine, and it's not everybody else's. And so is the story for everybody else. It's no one else's but theirs. So how do we move forward beyond that, George?
Man, really,
well, when it comes to the impeachment issue, everybody is bringing their own story to the room, right? And it's where the discussion is important, is to get all those stories and set them on the table. And the first question that I would ask after hearing everybody's story is, what is the goal of impeachment?
Yeah,
as leaders, as you as leaders of the country, what is your goal with this impeachment process? Is it to penalize? Is it to unify? Is it to set a precedent? What is the goal? Because you're going to find that just from that simple question, like across the country, you're going to have all these people responding to that question from their own stories. And then, as Dr. Rivers said, once you get those stories out, after you respect each other's experiences, now you have to do the hard piece. And we had a similar discussion about this a few weeks ago that I thought was pretty intense. You have a mission as political leaders of the country. If your philosophy does not require a sacrifice from you, then you really don't adhere to that mission. So at some point, everybody at that table has to be willing to give up something for the greater good. If everybody at the table is insistent on getting 100% of the needs of their particular narrative met, then that is failed leadership.
Dr. Clyde, I hear you.
Yeah. I wanted to say there has to be something at stake that both people value. Like example, I was speaking with law enforcement in a city a couple weeks ago, and I said, do you want your family to be able to walk in this city at night and be safe? Go to the store and be safe. So everyone in the room said yes. They wanted their families to be safe and be able to live life and be in the community and get along and just get along in the community. So in this thing, we're looking at I tell people, if we're on the Titanic and it goes down, we all go down. So when you're fighting for a country, now there is something at stake that we all can actually benefit from. So there has to be something big enough and important to all parties to really even have a true dialogue.
Outstanding. This is what we do. You can hear because you're going to probably have to record this and play this back, people who are watching this, because there's several things that both George said, Dr. Clyde said, what Martha said, what we've said here so far that you're going to have to hear again. We're going to ask some more questions. When we come back from the break, we've got some more questions in real world applications that we're going to ask. And you'll see how the same theme runs through those questions and those answers. And more than anything, it makes you generate those questions that George is talking about, those things that need to be answered. And we all need to do that in our lives. So we'll talk about that more when we come back on Talk About Unity.
Five, four, three, two, one, zero, ignition, liftoff.
Don't push me because I'm close to the edge.
I'm trying not to lose my head.
Hey, this is the Talk About Unity show where I bring the talk.
And I bring the unity.
And together we talk about unity. Unity is what matters.
Come on.
And right now in our country, that's what we've got to do. So we do that here at Talk About Unity on the Edge Radio Network. Be with us every week.
It's going to be awesome. It always is. And I tell you what, the more we seek first to understand, then be understood, we make progress.
And we like to do that. And that's why everybody's on the brink. We love what we do at Edge Radio because everybody's on the edge. We bring them back from the edge and we bring the unity. So we're just glad to Edge Radio Network every Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Talk About Unity because here at Edge Radio Network, truth still matters. Welcome back to Talk About Unity. I've got my house crew, and we're solving all of the country's problems with Dr. Clyde Rivers, Joshua Bach, George Middleton, and Martha J. Rogers. I'm Carlen Charleston. I'm your host today, and I'm glad to have my family here, the house crew. And we were talking about how we were going to fix Congress and the impeachment issue. I wanted to hear from Joshua. Josh, I wanted to ask you about your skills at networking and the way that you bring people together. What role would that play in what's going on in our Congress right now?
Well, I think first of all, we need to take a look at the idea that over the course of the last 50 years, let's just look from the media perspective. We went from hundreds of different localized media companies to really about 5 major world media companies today. Mm-hmm. There's been a big transition, a lot of focus towards that larger picture on the nationalism perspective. And so I think one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is instead of the Democrat, Republican, or you name the divisive, polarized parties that are against each other, one thing that does not get talked about is the idea of globalism versus localism. What's happening right in my neighborhood, right in my household, right in my head? So I think a lot of times on the national side, we're working with problems that we have no ability to fix. And we become more and more of a spectator, as opposed, if you look to the clear opposite side, where do I have the greatest control to do to make the most change and impact? And it's right here. Then it's my family, then it's my neighborhood, then it's my, the company that I work with or work for. So a lot of times on the localized podcast and the things that we do, we want to bring, okay, we've got these things that are happening right here in our neighborhood. Let's pull resources together so we can take action. Because I do know this, is that when we lose purpose and when we're not out there taking action and we lose purpose, we start to get brought down into this negative space. And so I think more than anything else, a lot of focus is on things that we have no control of. Not to say that we don't need to pay attention, not to say that we don't need to vote and participate. But I believe if we were able to focus and bring it back from that nationalistic approach back to spending a lot more time and attention right in our backyard, that's when we can start seeing some change.
That's outstanding. I hear this one guy who comes on the radio all the time, and he says, what's happening in your house is more important than what's happening in the White House.
By far.
Yeah. And Jordan Peterson, I heard him talking one time, and he was saying, you've got some of these young people who are going out and saying, I'm going to change the world. And Jordan Peterson says, well, you might want to start with making your bed every morning. Start right there where you have control. And so I think that's very important for us to understand that I think we solve the world's problems as we solve our own. Start small. So that's very good. All right, let's give another situation I want to talk about where we bring the house to bear. Right now you've got a lot of issues out in our country with businesses and companies struggling to survive. And a lot of it's related to COVID and the economy. You drive down the street and you see this happening. And you've got businesses having to deal with at the same time these issues of diversity, inclusion, equity. All those things are kind of clashing because they're trying to see, because capitalism has always been touted as the tool, and you've got that competing now with this issue of how you value people in your workplace and in the marketplace. So they take on a distinctly different flavor in today's environment because of COVID. And I drive down the highway and I look at businesses, and because I've been a businessman before, I look at those businesses and inside I go, man, I know what they're feeling. I know what it's like to realize you're done. You're done. You've invested years, you invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're done. And so that's very painful. So what is the house, and how would the house deal with not only the people issue, but also the issues of profitability? So you've got these things happening, and we're going in as the house crew. So a company calls us in. What is the house solution? How do we look at that?
Yeah, what I think you have to look at is this. I tell people often that education has a shelf life. Certain forms of education has a shelf life. Let me give you an example. When I was in college, we used whiteouts and typewriters. Well, that's now obsolete. So now it's tech, it's all this digital stuff. That wasn't in my day. So the education I got was good, but it expired. So if you don't move with change, and to be candid about, on the other side, there's industries that are booming right now, having record sales going. It's Zoom, and those companies have shot through the roof because of innovation and technology. And I think businesses need to reconsider, is what we're doing relevant for the time period ahead? Because many of my friends had their best years in business this year, and others lost it. So I think it's a matter of what you're looking at, what's your vision, and are you geared for the future?
So is it the type of house that those people have built, or is it the creativity of the people in the house?
I would say it's a monument versus a movement. Some businesses are monuments, and monuments are pretty but they die. And you have to have things in your business have to be fluid. Like I was speaking with a young girl, was on a show I was on a couple weeks ago. She said something. She said every business needs a child. She went into her dad's business. She saw everything he was doing that was old, and she gave him new innovative ideas that young kids were thinking about. And his business turned around and is flourishing now because a kid came in and saw where her dad's business was stuck.
So, George, what are the questions that we would ask to a company who's considering balancing out their diversity, inclusion, equity versus their issues of profitability?
First question I would ask is, are they paying attention to what COVID is telling us? COVID is stripping bare the behaviors of organizations, of systems, of companies, profit and nonprofit. So are today's companies paying attention to what COVID is trying to teach us? And the primary answer from that question, if they're not, then they are going to be subject to being a monument, as Dr. Rivers pointed out, because if they're not shifting and adapting to the change that's present in 2021, they're dying out. If you're not growing, you're dying. And so this is an opportunity. Many are looking at our present situation as a disaster or crisis, but it's actually an opportunity, because there are a lot of people who are actually doing well through this COVID period of COVID. They are learning, they're being open, they're being flexible, they're being adaptable, and they're being inclusive. So that's the question. Are you paying attention to what COVID is trying to teach you?
And big question here is that a result of the foundation that has been laid? I mean, when you look at some of these companies who have in fact profited during this very down period in our society, so while a lot have gone out of business, some people have flourished. Was that a function of the foundation, or is it a function of something else that takes place in the house? What do you say, Martha?
Well, it can be due to the foundation, but some businesses were just the right kind of business to flourish during COVID, and other businesses weren't. So they might have had a good foundation, but they were just the wrong type of business to flourish when there's a quarantine and shelter in place.
Well, it's kind of like, but some of those businesses then needed to, as George was saying, be able to flex.
And some of those businesses have. So,
and is that a function of the value that you place? Like, for instance, if you got all these people that were this type because they were able to do this thing, do I get more value to be able to flex if I have a broader array of people, or is that irrelevant to the goals of the institution?
That's relevant, because adaptability and flexibility are always important, because our world is constantly changing. So we need to be able to take risks and to have an expanded mindset so that we can take a crisis and go, okay, this doesn't have to beat me down. What direction do I need to go now? And I believe that we have inside of us what we need to win, to be successful. And so we need to be able to look at the gifts inside of us, the ideas, the creativity, and go, okay, how can I make the most of this? You hear about the numbers of depression and alcoholism rising, and child abuse, but you also hear about families and businesses who are creative, they're trying new things, and they're becoming stronger. So it's all about what's in here.
Yeah, Martha, when we were on one of the breaks, we had this conversation about that value that we begin to assign to others. And I want to know, before we're going to go to break here in a couple of minutes, so anybody who's got an answer, because this is the gold question today, how do we actually take that value that we are now assigned to others and make it into something that is profitable for my organization, institution, business, family, home? How do I take that? Because it's one thing for me to say, I value you, to do that. How do we make that something tangible and profitable?
Well, I would like to first premise it by saying, and I'm always coming at things from a mental health or therapeutic perspective, that before you can truly value anyone else, you have to really value yourself. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of things that we do on a daily basis that betray that conscious statement of that we love ourselves. When we do a lot of things subconsciously that don't show love to ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves, the way we categorize ourselves. So before you can actually see the value in someone else, you have to be honest enough to see the value in yourself. There's another worn out cliche that goes like this: hurt people hurt people. And many of us don't realize that we're walking, gaping wounds of emotional hurt. Mm-hmm. And because we lived with it and survived with it, and seemingly on the outside seem successful, we feel like, hey, I went through it, so this must be the way to do it. And we make our dysfunction the norm. Mm-hmm. So right now, this is the time for us to do some serious self-reflection and reevaluate who we say we are, so that we can really move forward. If that's the goal, is to move forward and not repeat the definition of insanity. To really get some different results, we need to really look at ourselves and be honest and make the change where we honestly need to make the change if we're going to meet the goals we say we want to meet.
That's our Chief Cognition Officer, George Middleton. Dr. Clyde.
Yeah, and if we're going to move forward, we have to understand that life moves forward. What you built 30 years ago may not be relevant now. And I think I think it's so important that we understand that you cannot win by yourself. And like as a former basketball player, I watch games now and I watch kids working. Like, man, those kids don't work as hard as we did. They do it differently. So it's important that we understand in this day and hour, we have to allow differences to come. And this is why I never try to spend time with people in my generation only. Mm-hmm. Because when I do, I get stuck in that actual generational block. I remember I was talking with the president of a country one day, and I said, what's the hard thing to deal with in your country? He said, I have 3 generations in one. And to help us learn how to live and blend together, there has to be a blend of all 3 generations. So one thing I do, I make sure I work with all generations, the old, the middle, and the young, so that so our voice stays relevant in what's taking place in the world today.
Beautiful. Thanks. That's our Chief Collaboration Officer, Dr. Clyde Rivers. I Change Nations. Outstanding. Joshua Buck.
Yeah, well said, Clyde. That was awesome, man. I wish I could. I didn't bring my notepad out.
Don't worry, we got to record it. We can watch it again. Yeah.
Okay. You know, I think it's important to know that because my wife is in a position where she's working from home. She hasn't been to the office, and it's not looking like she's going to be able to do that in the next several months. And I'm just looking at all these different companies that are trying to figure out different ways to connect and to maintain those relationships, that mentoring aspect from leadership all the way through the core of the company. And I think it's important to make certain that I believe people need it now more than ever because of all the stresses that are occurring, the outside stresses, the family stresses internally. Martha, you had mentioned the idea of alcoholism and depression is on a rise, and the mental health aspect is truly through the roof. So from a leadership perspective is really diving in and taking the pulse of our teams and figuring out, okay, with things that have changed and how can we not only pivot, but how can we make certain that we're meeting you where you're at, yet in the same token, leading them to effectiveness, leading them to productivity through creativity and finding ways. Again, I go back to the idea of purpose. When we start losing our purpose, that's when we start swaying. We become less effective. We become we run the risk of diving into depression or alcoholism, those types of things. So it comes down, that communication needs to be stronger now than ever. Let's pivot and let's figure out ways to do that and build upon it.
Outstanding. Our Chief Communication Officer, Joshua Buck. And now we have our closing remarks from our Chief Civility Officer, Martha Rogers.
I think this is exactly what we are trying to do. That was so well said, Josh. We want to help other people to be the best that they can be, to be the best company they can be, to be a strong family, to be a strong church. And if any group is struggling in the area of understanding their own value, of knowing how to maximize communication, of knowing how to deal with relationship issues, maybe incivility on the job, or just profitability. We don't have to know a lot about how to fix profitability, because when you fix communication and relationships, you're more successful. Things just work the way they're supposed to work. In an environment where people feel valued and safe, and they can be their authentic self and be appreciated for the gift that they have to bring to the table, then they are free to use their gift, to use their expertise for the common good. And so this creates an environment that will produce success. And so this is what we want to do. I think we have organically we developed this process, and so we are refining how we can communicate to other people how to build your house. It starts with your personal house, and then the group, the organization that you're in. How can you lay a quality foundation and build a house where each person contributes for the common good?
Outstanding. Great words, Martha. And you notice once each person began to speak, they talked about what the person before them said. And let me tell you why that's so authentic, because in the house, we're usually fighting. All right. And so that's the house where people value the disagreements regardless of where they come from.
I love it.
And we all know Dr. Clyde Rivers, George Middleton, Joshua Bach, Martha Rogers. I want to thank you all for being part of the house crew. We're going to do some great things. Let's go build some houses. You've heard us on this house edition of Talk About Unity. We thank you all. I'm late today and we're out. Thank you, Vince, our producer. And I want to thank the house crew once again. See you all next time on Talk About Unity.